So what is recursive fetch? What is that? What do I mean by that? Well, it means after I run a fetch, I get back a list of things, and I need to fetch all of those things individually. So that's actually a bit complicated than you think. It might be like yeah, if I run, so the way this is set up is I have a backend server.js, very similar to it to your assignment setup. Yes, so I need two terminals, just like assignment. One's to run the backend, one's to run the front end. So to run the backend, it's just a Express.js backend. Cool. So it's server.js node server.js. I have not run yarn, I believe. Yes, I need to run yarn. So it should be all in package.json. It's using cause and express. Cause is required to allow fetching the backend server. You don't have to understand this, but basically it's like a Flask server, and this one allows front end to run fetch to this URL. Cool. All right, so let's run yarn. And now I should see a no modules. And then if I run no server, it should work now. Cool. It says server listening on port 3000. That's this line printing. That means server is listening. If I fetch localhost 3000 like this, it should run a fetch. So let's look at index.js and index.html. So this is the index.html. Basically has nothing but using source index.js. So we wanna. So currently, I'm just appending. I hard-coded the list, and so in the database, we have a list of users. Each one has an ID and a name. What we want to do is create like a list of users in the front end, but the data is all in the back end. So to do that, we will need to run. So currently it's just being hard coded, but the backend provided two routes. One is get all the users, and the other one is get each individual user providing the ID. Okay, so to demonstrate, that fetch gives you a list of all the users. This fetch is user without S and then given the ID. So if I do .then response, it should be returning a JSON. So I believe it should be returning a JSON. So we do .json and then .then again. We can just quickly print out data. So if I run this console log, it prints 0, 1, 2, 3, and that is literally the IDs 0, 1, 2, 3. So if we want to get the name, that's the tricky part. It returns a list of IDs. It doesn't return a list of names. So we do need to go through this list and call another route using the individual IDs. So now this becomes tricky. Okay, so I call fetch in the first .then, that's fine. Second .then, I need to actually loop through the list. So this one, it returns a list of IDs, right? So if we do for off ID in IDs, and then yeah, if we just console log out ID, that will give you one each on a separate line, like this, 0, 1, 2, 3. So we can call this fetch inside the loop to get the name. This one will be ID, and then we can use template string to parameterize the ID. So this will actually do fetch in a loop. Okay. Now, after that, well, it will be the same thing. Dot then twice. This dot then is exactly the same. This dot then will now give you username. Cool. Might be missing a bracket. What's this bracket for? That's a for loop. Okay, cool. I'm not missing a bracket. And then if we console log username, it actually return the whole thing, or just username. Great. So you return a username, so a dictionary of ID and the name. Cool. What we can do is if we just need a username to give a list like this, like Hayden, and next one, Clarence, etc. So we will do, we can deconstruct the dictionary. Give it, we don't actually need the ID, but we do need the name. So this one, it just, we can do ID, or we can just ignore the parameter. Oops. Now I'm getting all 4 of those. Cool. So then let's grab this code so we can display it in a list. Cool. So make it UL. Well, UL shouldn't need to be in a loop. We just need one UL. And every UI, li, so every list element, the inner text will be the name, right? There you go. So this is doing a fetch and then have another fetch in the loop, right? This doesn't always work, because what if in a loop and you do the fetch, what if you need another fetch? And this breaks really quickly. And this only works when I'm appending to it immediately. What if I need to process this data? What if like I need to put this in a function and return a list of usernames? Then this wouldn't work. Okay, so if we want to return something out of this instead of just appending it in line, let's try, for example, make a list like users. So if we just make a list and we do users.append, is that no? Users? Not giving me autocomplete. It says any. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how you. Oh, okay. I need it. There we go. Okay, push. So yeah, so that's a list. If I push name, and then here, after the fetch, I console log users. Who thinks this will work? In the chat, or give a thumbs up or thumbs down react if you think it's gonna work. We only have 2 people here. Okay. That's good. So let's run this. I don't need that. So I'm going to just refresh. Oh, it printed an empty list. Well, that's because this will run, and then this will run, and then inside. Because fetch takes a while. It doesn't run immediately. So it runs fetch, but then will run after it's finished. So this doesn't finish immediately, but this does. So you printed empty list before we got to push. Okay, and that's a big problem. How do we resolve this? If you need something out of a dot then, you have to make a new promise. If you're not using async await, here we're just using fetch and dot then. So if you're not using async await and you're just using promises and dot then, you have to make a new promise and wrap the dot then in a promise. So let me demonstrate. So we need to make a new promise. To do that, const new promise is new promise. And promise, it takes in an error function. It takes in a function, and that function takes in 2 arguments: resolve and reject. Cool. So this is how you make a new promise. And in that promise, anything you resolve will come back. It will make more sense if I keep going. So what we need to do now is do the fetch in the promise. Fix the indentation. And instead of using users.push, so instead of using users.push, we need to resolve the promise. So declare the users inside this promise, actually here. And then because we are in the same loop, if we just try to resolve it, let's see what happens. So resolve is here. No. Okay. Because we're in a nested fetch, this is more complicated. If we just, I'm the only one here now. Oh no, it's okay. Yeah, this is going to be very confusing, by the way. So ask any questions, and you need to understand this to actually properly, like, do your assignment too. Because you're not allowed to use async await, so it's going to get really confusing when you have larger promises and you have to do a lot more than just simple. This is very simple. I set it up in a way that's super just 2 routes and then just ID and name. There's nothing more complicated. There's nothing more complicated than this. So okay. So in here, if I resolve the name, what it's gonna do, before that, okay. Before that, I need to actually make a promise.then. Sorry, promise.all. So instead of using a loop, since this is if it's a loop and you do fetches in a loop, you're doing fetches constantly. So how many fetches are you doing? How many IDs are there? So instead of doing a loop, we can wrap all of those fetches in one array. So let's get rid of this. So IDs is a list of IDs, and if we map it to So every ID, we map it to a fetch. Oh, I shouldn't have cleared the let me just undo and copy this line. Okay. ID like this. So I'm mapping a list of IDs to a list of fetches. And what does fetch return? A promise. So this becomes a list of promises. If I do it step by step, I'll just print this out. It's gonna print a list of promises. I'm gonna get rid of this. Cool. So now, I made a promise, and I fetch all the users, get a list of IDs back, and I'm just converting a list of IDs to a list of promises. So now, I printed out a list of promises. Okay. And what do we need? Well, why do we need a list of promises? Well, a list of promises allows us to promise the OR, because promise the OR takes in a list of promises. So promise the OR takes in promise. How do I show this? Values is an array of promises. Yes. So promise the OR takes an array of promises. And that is what this is, right? So with promise the OR, we can do .then on promise the OR. That makes sure all of the promises are resolved before it goes to .then. So .then now will have a list of users. And since this is a list of users, we can again do the loop in here. And then let's log out our users line by line. I have not do the JSON thing. Okay, it's not JSON. Actually, since it's from, I think I need to do JSON in here instead of there. Yeah, so right now, I'm getting a list of users. So instead of users, that should be response. And for every response, I need to do r.json and then .then. Yeah, that's right. And now I can get user. There we go. So since it's a list of promises, .then will give you back a list of responses. Since it's a list of responses, we have to resolve individual one by calling JSON to get a list, to get the actual data. So I'm doing this in a loop now. We still haven't solved the problem of how to return it, but now that we have a promise to all, it's very easy to return this. So now we're getting a list of users and in the list of JSON, right? This is kind of annoying because we are only getting the first response. We're getting the first .then. Since there are two .thens, first one is getting the JSON, second one is getting the data. What we can do is we can actually map this again to, so yes, so we can do the JSON in here. .then response and then response.json. So this fetches gives you a promise. .then.json gives you another promise. So this is still a list of promises. So now when we resolve, we can actually get the list of users, I believe. So wait, on line 8, is it still making a fetch multiple times? Yes, that's correct. It's putting all the fetches and all the JSON, which is also returning a promise, put in the list and do promise to all. There we go. I believe this should work. hard refresh. Yeah, so this does exactly the same thing as what we did before. So this is fetching all of calling fetches and calling JSON at one go. And then we get a list of promises from this JSON. And then since we promised the all.then, we can get a list of users out. And a list of users, now what we can do is deconstruct this to just have a name. This is exactly what we did before. And then if we just print out the name, yeah, we just got a list of names, right? And then we can do the const names is equal to empty list names dot push name. Now, because we are wrapped in a resolve, we can do resolve bracket names. And what that means is we can, this is a just defining a promise. So if we do new promise, which is the variable name of the promise, dot then users or names, and then we console log names, we're gonna get it out. This is actually outside of this .then, right? Because everything has to wait for this to finish. But resolve, make sure if you do .then on the promise, we get everything back after everything has been resolved in here. There we go. We'll print out a list of names. I'll give you some time to sink in. Any questions on this one? So this is how you can return things from fetches that is deep, very deep in the .then. I'm good. Okay, cool. Yeah, so now we can actually do the appending thing in here. Oh, I deleted that again. I'll just reproduce it. Shouldn't be too hard. So instead of you, that should be li, and that should be ul, and then li dot inner text is equal to name. I do need to loop to this. Name of names, and then all right, that should be it. Cool. All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so this is usually how you approach in your assignment too, when you need a list of things returned from a list of fetches, okay? And then you can do your DOM manipulation outside of .then. Otherwise, you have to do it inside .then, okay? And this like kind of avoids callback hell. Okay, cool. Could you briefly explain? That's a very good question. So resolve means everything's resolved, and then it can call it in .then. Reject means you have to you can catch it in .catch. So if I in here before I do resolve, I just reject it, and then you can give it anything, like you can give it hi. That means if I do .then, it's not gonna get it. But if I do .catch error, print out error, that should print out hi. Yeah, so we printed hi, and it didn't go into here. So reject allows you to pass variables and then get the variable in .catch. Resolve allows you to pass variables and then get it in .then. So if you can do yeah, it's really nice. So if you really want, you can do reject names, and then that will actually give you the names of here in catch, which is not the convention, because reject is meant to like produce an error. So usually reject, you can give an error message. Like yeah, if things failed, but then yeah, there are just two different ways to pass to allow users to use this promise by doing .then and .catch. But yeah, all right, let me undo.